Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books of 2022, but before we go ahead and get on into the books, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new bookish content. I post new videos every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, and sometimes other days throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check down the description box below for links to all of my social media, my Buddy Read Discord, and my Patreon, where you can be entered into winning book giveaways from me. So I read 38 books in 2022 and I wanted to do a top 5 list, but when I was going through the books that I'd read, I ended up pulling out 8 books that were my favorites and 2 of them tied kind of, and it'll make more sense when I go through the list. But I'm going to be starting at kind of number 8 book and then going up to number 1. So let's go ahead and get on into it. Also, I do have reviews for the majority of these books, so I will make sure to link all of those reviews up in the cards if you are interested in watching them. If you want more, I guess, an in-depth explanation of why I like these books so much and things I also didn't like about them. The first book is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is an adult standalone sci-fi, and it follows a character named Ryland, and he is assigned this epic task of essentially saving Earth from this microscopic, almost type alien invasion. And he is not like a hero. He is a teacher and a scientist before that. So he's almost like voluntold to be part of this expedition to go into space and find a way to save Earth. And he is assigned to go with 2 other scientists slash astronauts, but he wakes up one day on his ship and everyone's dead but him. And he ends up coming into contact with someone in space that he does not expect. And the 2 have to help each other survive as well as save each other's planets. And the reason I like this book so much is because Andy Weir's writing is definitely very light, even though the subject matter can be fairly serious. He definitely has a very lighthearted tone and incorporates a lot of humor into his book. The way that this story is told is alternating timelines. So we have the current timeline, and then we have flashbacks that explain everything leading up to how Ryland got into space, and that really kept me engaged because Andy Weir does throw a lot of like science and facts into his books, and it was nice to have those flashbacks to break that up. And then I really enjoyed the relationship and the dynamic between Ryland and our other protagonist. And I think my favorite thing about this book is the ending, because it wasn't like your conventional ending in my opinion, and I just found it really sweet and endearing. And I have heard rumors that this is going to be hopefully made into a movie, and I'm super stoked to see this on the large screen. Coming in at number 7 is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This is an adult horror, and it's my first Grady Hendrix book, and you can bet your butt that I'm going to be reading more of his work in the future. And it's a standalone, but it follows 1990s housewives as, well, in particular, a housewife named Patricia, as she is 100% certain that a vampire has moved into their safe, quaint South Carolina neighborhood. And it is all about her trying to convince people that this character is a vampire, trying to find evidence and investigate all of the awful things that he's doing, and just the lengths that she will go to protect her family and to make the truth known. And the reason that I'm putting this book on this list is not so much that this was a pleasant read. This book was not a pleasant read. I will never read it again. It's not a warm, feel-good book. But Grady Hendrix he was able to evoke so many emotions from me. Anger, happiness, disgust, like even a little bit of lust and romance in there, even though it's not the majority of it. And I always say any author who can make me feel emotions strongly through their writing is to be commended. That's a good author. And the horror elements to this book were sparsed out perfectly. It wasn't overwhelming. I'm not a big horror reader, and I just love how it was juxtaposed against like the day-to-day housewife scenes. So I would recommend this, especially around like the Halloween season, which is when I read it, and I'm really excited to delve more into Grady Hendrix. Coming in at books 5 and 6 are The Pariah by Anthony Ryan and The Martyr by Anthony Ryan. These are books 1 and 2 of his Covenant of Steel series. And I have already pre-ordered book 3 because I love this series so much. Anthony Ryan, I've said this before, is one of my favorite authors because he's just one of those authors that is very character driven. And this is an adult fantasy series. We are in the life of our main character, Alwyn Scribe. He is an outlaw that, was involved with this outlaw band, and slowly, through circumstances he can't control, gets involved in this huge war and all of the politics of these worlds. He's following a woman that has a huge influence and is leading almost this type of crusade in these lands. And another reason that I like this book is I love an underdog story, and Alwyn is someone who everyone underestimates, but he is super bright, super smart, and he is definitely not always likable. So he's a very real character. He's someone that can do good things, but also bad things, and I don't always agree with his decisions or his thought processes. So he's not always good and noble. So Anthony Ryan is just able to write characters that are real and raw and sometimes unlikable, and I absolutely love it. So I had to have these 2 books on this list, and I cannot wait to get book 3 when it comes out in July. Next, we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is an adult thriller, and this is the first book I read by this author before, so now I also want to read more books by this author. But in this book, we follow a character who is a psychotherapist, and he's following the case of this woman who is accused of shooting her husband, and she goes to court, gets convicted, but after she shoots him, she never ever says a word ever again, and everyone thinks she's just lost her mind, so she's placed in this, asylum for mentally ill people, but our main character just wants to find out exactly what happened. And the reason that I like this book so much is because I loved how our author composed this narrative. And what I mean by that, and it's really hard to talk about without giving away spoilers, but he establishes the current timeline, the current story, and the interactions between, what's his name? Theo, the therapist, and Alicia, the woman who's accused of murder. And then it goes into flashbacks. We are following Alicia as she is writing information in her journal, but then we also have flashbacks to Theo and his life. And at first I really didn't understand why these things were important, why the author was focusing on these things, but it actually contributed to the plot quite a bit, and we see how he slowly converges all of this information together to reveal to the reader what actually happened. And I really loved the twist. I thought it was really well done. I inhaled this book. I think I read it in maybe 2 days. It was definitely a page turner. The ending was really surprising. It wasn't really exactly how I saw things happening. So I just love when thriller authors are able to be unpredictable, throw in twists and turns to confuse the reader, and reveal information slowly to keep the reader engaged. And that's exactly what the author did. So I could not include The Silent Patient on my favorite books of 2022. Coming in at number 3 is The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is the final book in the Mistborn series, particularly Mistborn Era 2. And this book was probably one of my favorites out of the entire second era Mistborn because all the things that Brandon had been building up to was finally resolved in this book. So he had slowly been developing our characters and our character arcs. He'd slowly been developing this plot and bringing in all different elements of his Cosmere in order to kind of fill in the things that he needed to make this book work, and I just loved it so much. The characters have grown so much, their relationships have grown so much. We get so many cameos from different characters of the Cosmere. We get, involvement of different worlds in the Cosmere in this book, and we are seeing a world that is progressing technologically more, which is interesting because you have the technology advancements combined with like the Allomantic magic system of this world, which was super cool. Brandon is expanding more and more on the magic of the world of Scadrial and incorporating different vestiges from other worlds in his Cosmere. So it was just like a big mashup of Brandon's worlds. And I've seen a lot of criticism from people saying it was just like too much, like he was just bringing in too much from the Cosmere. I personally liked it. I didn't think it was too much at all. And I just thought that the ending was absolutely great. It was bittersweet, but it was just a perfect ending. This series went out with a bang, and I couldn't imagine it ending any other way. Obviously, this was a 5-star read for me. So I'm super pumped to continue with Brandon in 2023 with his 4 secret novels. Coming in at number 2 is Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. This is book 3 of the Fits in the Fool trilogy, and the last book in her Fits Realm of the Elderlings universe. And the reason that I had to include this book on this list is just because, I've been reading this series for about 10 years and I am very invested in Fitz's life at this point. I have been with him through everything that he has been through, and he's a very real character to me. And I've grown to love him. I've grown to love the Fool and just all of the characters. And I've just been able to see his life unfold. And Robin Hobb is just an excellent writer when it comes to writing characters because they are relatable, they are real, they are infuriating at times and noble at times. And she's just able to make us feel for them because they go through experiences that we do, maybe not to such an extreme. And this book just pulled at my heartstrings. There was a lot of things revolving relationships that were hard to read about, and there was also just so much expansion of the world in this book. We get way more information about the Fool and where he comes from, and kind of all of the involvement of the white prophets and exactly what that looks like, and just the corruption of such a system. So it just was kind of like the cherry on top to Hobbs' world and just the final explanation of how everything operates in her world, as well as just seeing the end of the character's life. So I absolutely love this book. There were scenes that just made my heart hurt at points, but it was such a good series overall. And coming in at number one is a reread for me, and that is Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. And the reason I'm including it as number one is because I read this book when I was a teenager, so I feel like it 100% deserves to be on this list because I ended up loving this book even more upon reread than I did the first time. And I think that's just because I am way older now and I'm able to see things that at, 15, 16 years old, I wasn't able to see and understand. And if you don't know what this book is about, I'm sure most people do. It follows a vampire who is recounting his story of turning into a vampire and his experiences to a guy who basically collects stories about people's lives. And Louis is a very flawed character. He is not your traditional vampire. He feels way more like a human than vampires are supposed to. Vampires are supposed to be very predatory, and Louis still has those human emotions of empathy. And the reason that I like this book is because even though we are discussing the life of a vampire, there is definitely elements that Anne Rice, I think, purposely incorporated into Louis' experiences that could emulate that of human experiences. So even though Louis is talking about what he went through as a vampire, like in my head, I'm like, no, that's what we experience as humans. So it was almost, or definitely, a commentary on the human experience, which is why I loved it so much. And I love Anne Rice's prose. Like, her prose in this book was just, oh my gosh, it was so pretty. It was just absolutely a pleasure to read. And there were just quotes and just internal thoughts of Louis that just made me stop and think. There was just a lot of questions about, why do I exist? Am I inherently evil? And just a lot of philosophical questions that really stopped me reading because I wanted to think about them. And it was emotional. It was beautifully written. The characters, once again, are definitely flawed and real. And there were a lot of things about this that I could relate to. So definitely one of my favorite books of all time and deserves to go in the number one spot for 2022. Okay, you guys, those are my favorite books of 2022. Let me know in the comments if you read any of these and what you thought of them, or if you have any favorite books of 2022, tell me what they are, and I will see y'all in another video soon. Goodbye!